All right. I'm with Alana Newhouse, everybody. Welcome to Walk-Ins Welcome.
So good to be here.
I've always wanted to talk to you. You just are one of my favorite writers, honestly, in the discourse.
Thank you so much.
I'm a little bit of a fangirl.
It's mutual.
I don't understand what is happening with Tablet. Are you guys going? Let's get right into it. Tablet's also one of my favorite publications. You guys have put out consistently some of the best pieces in the past decade that I don't even know how long it's been around, but since I've been aware of it, your piece about everything being broken, I still read it probably once a quarter and tell everybody that they should read it. We had why am I blanking? I have the worst mom brain lately. The one about like all the oh gosh, we had him on the podcast to talk about it too. And I'm just completely blanking about the censorship and like
Siegel.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That piece was I'm assuming he's turning that into a book.
Yeah, he is actually. It's coming
Okay.
later.
It felt like a book.
Yeah.
So tell us, how long have you been around? What's going on?
So Tablet's been around for 16 years.
Okay.
We started out as a magazine on the internet. And in part because if you think back 16 years ago, the internet felt like a really fun, cool place and a place where you could have a conversation that could expand because of the platform, right? And it's gotten to a place where now it feels like conversations on digital platforms are narrowing in good ways and bad ways. And more importantly, you already don't know how much of what you read has been produced by bots.
Right.
Right. So what Tablet does is Tablet produces pieces of writing, analysis, insight that are meant to be made by humans for other humans.
Right.
So as a result, we felt like, well, what's the best form to give this to people in? And for us, that form naturally felt like print. We've always considered ourselves sort of genetically a magazine. And so what's going to happen now is Tablet's going to move, we're transitioning as of this month into a monthly print glossy magazine. Which means that the biggest Tablet stories, a lot of the ones that are your favorites, including your own piece for Tablet, which was amazing. Those pieces are going to come to you as a reader, they'll come to you in print and you'll be able to read them. It turns out also that because they're going to come to you and you're going to read them in print, you're going to remember them, which none of us do when we read stuff on screens. We actually don't really remember anything. But the stuff that's responsive to the news will still be on the site and we're not going to leave 2025 and pretend that.
Wait, so did you start Tablet?
I did.
And what made you want to start Tablet? What's your history?
So basically, I mean, if you think back to 2007, 8, 9, that was a time I was a newspaper magazine journalist, and I was really, really interested in digital spaces. I was interested in the idea that you could create a magazine. Magazines were particularly distinctive. They created special conversations. When I was growing up, for example, the thought leader magazines were all really unique communities. So if you were a Harper's reader, you weren't really a New Yorker reader. Right. Those things were different kinds of weirdos, basically.
Right.
And so I was like, well, the internet actually will allow you to create a conversation among your own kind of weirdo, but that's not bound by paper and by what you can ship and by who you can get to know. So I was like, I really want to start a magazine online. And I was really interested in identity and particularly in Jewish identity because it was the one that I had as my own. But I was also interested in Jewish identity because it felt to me like it felt like it's curious because it's ethnic, it's religious, it kind of traverses a bunch of bounds. And I was like, at the time, again, this is 2007, 2008, I was like, I wonder what identity is going to be like in America. And I was like,
you sweet summer child.
So I was like, this is going to be this like really interesting thing that only me and a couple of other people are interested in. And so we started Tablet as a magazine about Jewish life and culture. And by virtue of just a bunch of different trends that happened, including trends in the death of other magazines and the death of journalism, um, and also this sort of real interest in and kind of both and toxic interest in identity, um, meant that Tablet became this weird hub, not just of Jewish life and Jewish identity, but also using that Jewish identity as a way to have a conversation that could be broader. So,
Mm.
and I think that for us, that really ended up meaning that we looked at the world a specific way. And in the last 7 or 8 years, it's meant that Tablet has kind of become this general interest magazine that writes and edits from a particular perspective, but a lot of our writers, editors, readers are not necessarily Jewish, but they appreciate this kind of angle that that we take on things. So
Yeah.
that's Tablet.
So, did you go to college
I did,
to be a
unfortunately.
journalist?
I did, unfortunately.
Where did you go?
So I went to Barnard,
Okay.
um,
I'm
and
just
then
wondering how, because it seems like I would have guessed that the identity stuff was already pretty aggressive in college.
it's interesting because I was in college in the 90s, and political correctness, which was definitely a passion and a fever around those years. In a way, it definitely didn't feel like the iteration that then we all experienced in the
Right.
last 7 or 8 years. Um, it was real, and it was real enough, but it didn't feel like it was about. It felt like it was about politics, and it was
Right.
about people who were interested in politics, and that plenty of people who had no interest in politics, people who wanted to be engineers or scientists or artists, even never needed to think about it.
Right.
One of the things that happened the last round is that it really felt like you were oppressed into believing that no matter who you were, you had to take these stands. You had to make these things your priority, which was, I think, different from when I was at university.
Okay, yeah, that does make sense actually. Even I wonder if even if I had gone to college, it feels like it didn't really get ramped up until probably after I would have graduated had I gone through in the four I graduated high school in 97. So it feels like when I kind of merged into the internet in 2015, it was like everybody who had gone to college and been swimming in this sea of identity politics that infected literally it didn't matter whether you were in math or whether you were in gender studies. It seemed like no matter what you were in, it was something you were exposed to.
Right.
They were all coming into the workforce. So, yeah, I guess that would have been after the fact, and and it is wild now, I feel like we're on this kind of other side of it where people are pushing back against it, but it does at the same time, it feels stronger than ever. It's like a weird paradox that I can't particularly I'm not good at articulating it yet because I'm just noticing that everybody's pushed back against this kind of victim culture of identity politics that we've been swimming in, and yet everybody's also weaponizing their identity. Even it's almost like the only way people know how to fight.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that's so when you decide that there's a particular thing that is currency, right? Even if you resent that that thing is currency, if you grew up in an economy and that's the money that you knew,
Mm.
you're just going to try to spend it and
Yeah.
acquire it, right?
Yeah.
And it's really toxic, and it's hard to watch because you also look at people and you're like, I'm really interested in your ideas about biology, or
Right.
ideas about, you know, the color purple or whatever. And instead I have to just keep talking about who you are and what your identity is. And it's exhausting. And more importantly, it kind of doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. The internet did aggravate all of that too.
Yeah.
It's funny, I started around, I mean, it was 2001 when I really started understanding the internet in a way like you said, where it was this kind of magazine culture. I helped write for this website in LA that was a cult favorite, Buddy Head, and it was all about music, and it was punk, and these guys were like, Travis came from Idaho, and he was coding everything himself, and they had this crazy following, and they were so ahead of so many curves, and then Interscope one of the record labels wanted to buy them, and they were like, "Fuck you, we're punk rock, like, we're not selling out," and now then, like, it all went sideways, and, they probably should have sold out, but it was, like, such an early window into I was just addicted to magazines growing up and seeing that they were basically making an online magazine.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Wow, this is so crazy and free and wild that you can just do this." And they had fans all over America, and they were totally do it yourself. It was really like 1 or 2 guys in like this studio apartment, and that was really eye-opening for me, somebody who always kind of dreamed of writing for magazines. I was like, "Oh, I don't have to wait for gatekeepers." It was just the first time that I was like, "Oh, there aren't gatekeepers here." There were still gatekeepers in Hollywood, there were still gatekeepers, but it was the first time I really perceived just how liberating the internet was, and it was pre-social media too, so there was still because there was no social media, they were still forced to promote on the ground in ways that we were used to being '90s kids, like, with flyers and live events, and there was a nice blend of the online and the off, and the community still existed more in real life than it did online. And yeah, social media came along and kind of decimated all of that. You didn't actually have to leave to be with your community. And in some ways, it just threw like gasoline. It made us so much more tribal. It just aggravates that.
I also think that, I'm really interested these days. I think a lot about risk and
Mhm.
the ways in which we've created these lives weirdly in our in real life where there's very little physical risk. We have
Right.
like big administrative state and it takes care of everything for us. And we don't, if we have a problem, we call the cops or call customer service. We don't ever like the idea that I would potentially open up my own electrical box and try to fix something is just so foreign, right? And I think about that a lot because I think about the ways in which I think we play with risk online that we actually leached from our real life. And it's making us neurotic,
Mm,
right? Because when you take risk out of your life and you take the idea that you don't know what could happen today, you become less neurotic. If you believe that you can control everything, you become anxious.
right.
And I feel like there's this way in which one of the great things about magazines, and certainly about real life magazines, was that they brought risk into our thinking, into aesthetics, into like what you were going to feel. And to the extent that you could have it also have something related to real life, like music shows you went to or clubs you went to, that even upped that ante. But that's what's missing. Like we
Mm.
don't, there's just there's just a limited amount of stuff that you can risk on social media. And I just want to feel like we're living kind of fuller lives.
Yeah. I love the end of your piece about everything is broken because I actually do see a return to a lot of this stuff, and it is weirdly blended with the internet. So the
Yeah,
best, my husband, I would say his first instinct now because of the internet is to try and fix something on his own
it's great.
instead of calling someone because he's like, "Well, you can learn anything on YouTube. Like
Yes.
somebody has an answer for this." And I can go and Reddit and I can figure out what's wrong with my plants in a Reddit thread. And that is the amazing crowdsourcing of knowledge that now AI is stripping all of it, strip mining all of it. Um, and even I don't hate it. I'm not like one of these. My sister's really funny about this. She always talks about it because We talk about how everybody was afraid of the television. They were like, "Oh, the boob tube, these kids are
Yeah.
all gonna have their brain rotted," and now I remember my nephews came and stayed with me once when I was living in LA, and I was like, "They do not like, the idea of sitting in front of a TV as an event, it's like a quaint family event in the way that we thought about people gathering around the radio. It is a stationary thing, and it's like movie night with your family because they would just walk from room to room watching something on their phone. They were older, and I was like, "Oh, they're," and that was also when I realized they were watching everything on YouTube, something the streamers are just now catching up to. I'm like, "These kids treat YouTube like TV." They know YouTube just beat out everybody in streaming because Hollywood and the streamers literally didn't realize that people were watching YouTube on their TVs, like full screen television, until like 2 minutes ago. And so it's funny how and my sister will say, like, trying to tell my teen son not to use, she's like, "I don't know, I just feel like that train's already left the station." She's like, "This is like trying to tell people like, 'No, but the horse is great,' once cars were invented," you know? We were laughing about it like, "But the horse is wonderful. You love this mode of transportation." And they're like, "Yeah, yeah, but we've got cars now."
I think that the thing is like, look, I lean into technology. I always do, and I feel like it's important to do that, in part because I'm like, the sooner I understand how to use this and the sooner I master it, the sooner I can draw boundaries around it.
Right.
And I know what it's useful for and what it's not useful for. But if I resist it, it takes on a mystique and kind of almost magnetism and prurience, right? Because it's this thing that you are afraid of. And as a result, I think that is when it can take over your life. And that's when you can
Mhm.
become obsessed with it. So I always try to encourage people like get into the technology, actually like fall into it, master it, and then figure out the limited ways that you're going to use it in your life so that you can maintain actual human existence. Um, and to me, because to me, that's what it is. These things are instruments, and they're instruments that are meant to enrich and better our lives. The sooner we use them for those purposes, the better, basically,
Right.
my feeling.
You've all heard me screaming women for years now, and I'm a big advocate for women in general and women's health in particular. That's why I love Quest's line of medical tests specifically focused on women's health issues. They offer a basic women's health profile test that gives you a snapshot of your current health and wellness, women's hormone tests designed to identify imbalances associated with various health conditions, and specific tests for fertility, thyroid function, and even your menopause stage. This is all such important knowledge for women to have because it can affect the way you work out. It can affect what you should be eating. And just now, they're starting to really realize how much all of these hormones play into us losing weight, keeping bone density. All of this information is so important to you. Your results are delivered online quickly and discreetly, and you get all of this information without a doctor's visit. Ladies, prioritize your health. Visit questhealth.com today. Use the code Phetasy to get 25% off and find answers to the multitude of health questions you may have. That's questhealth.com and use code Phetasy for 25% off. And you have a child, so it's weird with technology. You can't just be that old Luddite that's like, "Back in my day, kids," and you can just carry on that way because you don't have kids who are constantly like the native wisdom that my toddler already has purely from observing the people around her is really quite something.
That's right.
And just having to, like, I've talked about this before, just FaceTiming with grandparents. One time when she was probably like 1.5 or 2, she just swiped a notification away as a text came in because she was FaceTiming with grandma. And I was like, "Where'd you learn how to do that?" But she just observed it. Or it's just intuitive. It's just
She's
wild. It's
intuitive, right? Because she's like, "That thing is in my face,"
yeah.
right?
So she's like, "Get rid of it."
Right, get rid of it. And it's true. And then on the flip side, you get, kids who do a lot of screens, particularly in the year, and then they go out in summer and they're spending their time on a beach or on a mountain and they're
Yeah.
actually outside, and you can see them figure out that, like, the best life is a life that has both. And the
Yes.
best life is a life where you master both and you have both of those experiences. You just like there's such a thing as tree blindness where we actually lose the ability to see in 3D because we look at screens, and it's not good for our brains. It's not good for our senses. It's literally not good for us. On the other hand, we're not going to go into some cave and actually live that way. It's not, I mean, I don't think it's not a life for me. Let me put it that way.
I saw that in your piece, The Tree Blindness, and I was like, I don't even wanna click on this link to find out what it is, but what is it exactly?
You basically lose it's the bottom line is technology has a ton of effects on our senses, right? So another area of study that people are trying to figure out is how are vast numbers of humans basically losing their sense of smell?
Wow.
Because increasingly, what is one sense we don't use on this phone, right? You can't smell anything through the phone. So if you have an existence where 8 hours a day, 6 hours a day that you used to be outside smelling different things, you no longer do. You sit in your apartment and you're not smelling anything, and you're seeing and interacting with the world minus one of the senses that basically evolutionarily pushed humans forward. What happens to human existence if we are missing that?
Right.
And I think it's an interesting, these things are interesting to me, not because I want to rewind the clock, but because I actually want to go forward into history, but understand it. And that to me feels like um, maybe smell becomes like a superpower.
Right.
I don't
Did you
know, right?
That's really interesting. Did you and have there been you mentioned earlier that people aren't remembering we don't remember things we read on screens. Are there studies that show
Yeah,
this?
there are. Yeah, there are super interesting studies that show that basically when you if you give two different groups of people that roughly have the same skills, so you're basically focus grouping, and you give them an article and you have them read it on a screen, and then you give them the article in paper. The people who read it in paper remember it 10 days later much better. Um, Mainly because they also remember they can visually cue themselves. So they remember that when they were reading it, they were sitting in this chair and there was a clock above them. They can actually, in their mind's eye, they have fuller contextualized memory of what they read, which helps their memory get cemented. But the other thing that they're finding is that not only do they remember more, but they remember better. So
Mm.
when you read something on a screen, a lot of times, and this has whole sorts of, that has a lot of implications, obviously, for discourse, right? Even an hour later, we're finding that people who read articles like literally remember things completely wrong.
Wow.
And so then the question isn't only what you're remembering, but again, this is the thing that I want to say. None of us are going to get our news from paper. Like, that's not a world we live in. We live in a
Right.
world where we want the news instantaneously and we can get it, and there's no reason not to, right? For a magazine like Tablet or places that are supposed to make you think more deeply and understand the world that you're in, that to me is where paper comes in.
Yeah.
Because I don't need you to get your news from paper or from
Right.
carrier pigeon, right? But I do need you to get your understanding of that news. There's a basically like a distinction that I used to make between different kinds of media. Newspapers in my mind were a hot medium, meaning you were supposed to get it, throw it down on your kitchen table and be like, I'm going out to protest, to vote for someone, to fix that pothole, to whatever. Like, you're supposed to act. It was heated. Magazines were a cool medium. They were contemplative. They were supposed to they were supposed to change your thinking and your feeling over time. To me, the internet's a super hot medium. And I don't know that we should be doing, at least all of our thinking about politics, society, the arts on this very, very white hot screen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something whenever I as someone who's been doing the podcast now for I don't even know how many years, 7 years, I guess. Whenever people say, "Do you want the PDF version of the book or the book?" I'm like, Please just send me the book. I will not read it if it's a PDF. I'll try if I absolutely have to because it's a short window and it's the only way to get it to me quickly enough, I will, but it just does not. I can remember where I read things when I read them on paper, but with no pages. Like, I can remember where on the page I read it if I'm going to look for a quote or something. If there's no pages, it's like one long scroll of information that I'm kind of half taking in, and I spend so much time looking at screens anyway. I like books. I am such I'm so I mean, my friend Max Meyer just started Arena Magazine.
It's great.
Um, there's so many people who have started magazines. I think The Blaze did one. I've been writing for Spectator magazine for 5 years now, and I love the magazine that they put together. Um, I'm huge Deseret I've done stuff for. I'm a huge like, I it still gives me so much joy. My name was on the cover of this coming Spectator, and it's been on there before, but I still get so much joy seeing it on the cover and seeing my name in print. And the first thing that I ever did actually was Playboy Advisor. After writing online for Playboy, I got the Playboy Advisor, and that was like I still remember the visceral feeling of opening a magazine and seeing my name in print. And
You
it's
know,
not the same as online. It's just not you don't have that, like, I remember the way the magazine smelled.
look, you know why? Because the bottom line is when you get a print magazine, there is an endless space in it. So you know you were chosen. Somebody chose you because they actively thought they were creating something that had some exclusivity to it. It had some standards, and you met them. And it goes back to the conversation around gatekeepers. The
Mm,
question becomes sort of, and I think it's a big question that we're having all over and all over culture and politics and everything. And I myself, my own feelings about it sway and go across the spectrum.
yep,
But you know, it's worth asking ourselves when it comes to magazines if the problem was having gatekeepers or it was just those gatekeepers.
right.
Like, I think they just sucked. And they stopped knowing what they were doing. They stopped understanding what their own magazine stood for. And maybe the problem isn't having a worldview and having standards and wanting to give people a curated meal. Maybe the problem is just that we didn't like their taste.
Mm, or that it all became similar. I mean, a kind
Really?
of flatness occurred and a lot of it was just corporate gobbling up every single magazine. That
That's right.
flatness kind of started, offline before it started online.
It
It
did,
w
and it definitely was it definitely was a feedback loop.
Mhm,
And, you know, and that flatness exists all over. It exists, if you look at colors of cars now compared to in the 1970s or 80s, if you look at the way that home appliances, like you can see flatness and sort of the leaching of color and texture and friction from all parts of our lives. But to me, it's a sin that you had flatness in magazines because the whole point of them was distinction. The whole
yes.
point was, if you read this magazine, you're not like the other people who read those other magazines. And that's helpful for your brain because you're like, "No, I wanna be this kind of person or not that kind of person or a little bit of that kind of person." And I just feel like it was a healthy way of forging identity and creating boundaries. And now without those, we're kind of like spraying that shit all over. Like
Yeah.
those feelings of who's in, who's out, how do we actually isolate people, push people out? It's now gotten radioactive and it's like almost taken over because we don't have these. smaller corrals to do what I think is very natural. Tribalism is natural,
Mhm.
and intellectual tribalism is natural. It's okay. Like I meet people all the time who say I hate tablet. It's like it's okay. Like it's not supposed to be for everyone. If it was for
Right.
everyone, then it wouldn't be distinctive. So I just feel like we lost some of that, and as a result, that that need for belonging, which is a human need, gets metastasized and kind of in bad ways.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about this stuff probably way too much, just the death of the magazine, and now I see kind of the resurgence of the magazine, which makes
Yeah.
me very happy, and, oh, there was something else I was just thinking when you were talking about, oh my gosh, it's something I have noticed with oh my gosh, I just, like, lost my train of thought. My mom brain is some days it's so much worse than others. Do you have
Mhm.
days where it's like mom brain is,
Yep.
bad and other days it's okay? Some days I feel like my mom brain is just not ever since I had a baby, people used to talk about mom brain, I'm like, "It really is a real thing." And then they've done all these studies that it's just because you're, like, hyper focused on the child. It's not it's not actually the gray matter gets, bigger or something like that, like, there's more gray matter, it's crazy. I'll think of it though, I'll find my train of thought eventually. The the whole, like, flatness in the culture, I do think people are revolting against it. I also see people we're definitely in that we're in the swing, I feel it's weird when you're, like, in the middle of the pendulum swing and you can feel it. It's like my stomach is a little bit there's, like, the butterfly feeling of being on a roller coaster, and I felt it in 2015 going into 2016 and was not really assertive or confident enough being so new in media to understand what was happening, but now I feel like I can definitely perceive, like, we're in this other swing, like, it already kind of peaked and we're on our way back, and there's this revolt against celebrities dead, then we had the influencer, but now you see this real resentment and, reaction to the influencer class. So I think we're on the other side of influencer culture, and I'm not
What's next?
sure. What?
What's next? What do you think is
I
next?
mean, this is I think a lot of the stuff you're saying about gatekeepers I really relate to because I'm like you. I'm of two minds about it. And on the one hand, my husband and I talk about this all the time. He's like, I want to write an essay like in defense of gatekeepers because there
Yeah.
is a certain amount just because you have an opinion doesn't mean all opinions are equally valid. And we live in this time where everyone thinks everyone's opinion is equally valid just because you have an opinion. And my husband's like, it's just not. I'm sorry. Like, I can disregard you if I can dismiss you or never have to listen to you again. People shouldn't feel obligated to platform people just because of free speech or something. He's like this kind of like leveling of the playing field is good on the one hand. And like you and I have talked about, the gatekeepers being gone has opened up the door to so many creative people who might never have been able to get in their foot in the door. But on the other hand, it's made for almost like a race to the bottom. The discourse just feels like it's
Oh,
deteriorating. I don't know what's on the other side of the influencer. Is it like magazines where celebrities come back? But I think Hollywood is so dead that that time is gone. It almost feels like it's like truly like the everyman, you know,
yeah.
the individual. Um,
The my first the editor's letter in the first issue of the new print magazine is titled "You Are Not the Media."
oh, right. I loved that.
And the argument that I try to make is, and I tell this story in it about 10 years ago when I gave a speech and there was a guy during the Q&A who asked me what I thought of what the at the time fairly new emerging Iran nuclear deal. And I kind of bullshitted some answer. I didn't say really anything. And at the end of my talk, he came over to me and he was like, listen, I'm a dentist. It's my job to wake up in the morning and to fix people's teeth. It's your job to actually tell me what to think about things.
Yeah.
You can't bullshit your way and be like, well, maybe this, maybe that. Like, have a thought. And what he was trying to say was, not you're my gatekeeper, but this is your job.
Right.
And there's a reason why I turn to you for it. And if you don't do it well, I'll turn to somebody else. But I want to turn to somebody who sees it as their responsibility and as their
Right.
job. And part of what we get wrong about, I mean, I happen to love the equalizing of the media space. Obviously, I feel really supportive of the idea that we should have other voices in these spaces. But I do think that we might want to think about an equality of opportunity rule here, which is anybody can potentially be a voice to listen to. But then when they open their mouth, if they sound like a dumbass, then maybe we shouldn't keep giving them a platform. And
Yeah.
maybe it's just that simple. And it's not about then shutting them up or taking away their free speech. It's simply the marketplace. The marketplace should not, like, if the marketplace doesn't reward that, that person hasn't been punished. They've simply been told they have to face reality.
I was with somebody over the weekend. This has like been a disheartening moment that I had over the weekend, and we were talking about just culture, all this stuff. I remember what I was going to say too. And he was saying that his mother gave him very good advice when he was young, and she said, when faced with something valuable or insightful or bullshit, people will choose bullshit every time. And he said, well, no, they'll choose it sometimes. And she said, no, every time. And you'll think that they don't want it and that they're being tricked, but they actually do want it. And it has been something that's a little bit disheartening that I've noticed over the past 5 years in particular, just all kind of around. I'm like, oh, no, I think people do like being bullshitted and in general, even while they think they're not, like, it's such a weird time right now because people will say, "I'm not, like, everybody's getting propagandized but me." There's this, like, whole group of people who are like, "Everyone's getting it's like, why would you think you're immune to propaganda too? Why wouldn't you think that you think you're just the special person who can't be given a load of propaganda?" I'm so, like, aware of the fact that I'm like, I can see it even with advertising. It's like if I see a Taco Bell commercial, I want tacos. That's how easy it is to influence somebody like me.
I
Like,
I
you
I
can't tell me that
I
this
get it.
isn't happening with media.
I totally get it, and I can't, and I'm not gonna be a Pollyanna and pretend that none of that is happening. It is, and it is really disastrous, and it's having disastrous consequences. On the other hand, I do wanna say that there was a thing that I noticed. It started in COVID. I noticed that the conversations I was having online felt like banging my head into concrete. And then the conversations I would have in real life with human beings, even the people I disagreed with, were actually so much more supple,
Mm,
and they were so much more reasonable. And that's been a trend that I've noticed more and more, that I could have the exact same conversation with people on X or even in a group chat. And it just doesn't go anywhere because people like just get down their own rabbit holes and they kind of can't see outside the screen of that rabbit hole, right? And
mhm.
then when you look at them and you say, I need you to understand this. I mean, the COVID example with me was, I remember talking to somebody in COVID and saying, I need to understand why in New York City so you're telling me it's an airborne virus, and what you're doing to people is you're locking the playgrounds So you're actually discouraging them from going outside. So in New York City, that means that they're staying inside of buildings.
Right.
They have to breathe the air of other people. I'm not a doctor, right? But something isn't making sense to me about this, right? When I would say that to somebody in real life, they'd look at me and be like, okay, that I don't know how to answer that.
Mhm.
When I would try to say it on the internet, including in articles that Tablet published, it would be like we were like we were mentally ill.
Right.
Like we just like lost our minds. And clearly we wanted everyone to die of COVID. And
Right.
that's why we were saying it, right? And you were just like, why can't you listen? Just listen to what my question is. And online, people couldn't listen.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know.
So
But
much of it is projection. So I've learned after like 10 years online, the very much the hard way. So much of what I'm getting is projection from whatever people are just project. We all do it. We're all just it's so easy to do online to just we do it in real life too, but it's so much easier to do with no tactile feedback to just project. So I saw this with the piece I wrote about how divorce never ends. I
yep,
wrote it was
yep.
very and this leads me to the thing that I was gonna say that I forgot, which is translating something from magazine to internet is really has been an fascinating experience too, because with the magazine, as you know, you have limited time and
Yep.
space, and you can see that all the words fit on that page for that column. And so the column feels complete, or maybe it doesn't, maybe it raises questions, but it's complete. And you're not going, well, why didn't she talk about this? Well, why didn't she talk about that? Well, why didn't you include this aspect of it? But then when we put it online, suddenly there's not that context. And you're like, guys, I had 850 words to talk about divorce. And I'm not gonna and I didn't ever say like the amount of projection that happened on that piece from every person who had ever been divorced, who got divorced for a reason. It was really wild. And my husband had to be like, Bridget, he's a therapist. So he's like, this is all projection, all of this. It's like women who left for reasons, and now you're saying something about your experience as a child of divorce, and they just don't want to hear it.
I think that the thing that you just pointed out is it actually explains your experience. First of all, I just want to say something. Um, for the record, I reached out to you because of that piece because it was phenomenal.
Oh
And it was
yeah,
such
yeah.
a good piece. Um, so I'm not just saying it now because I actually have digital proof that I loved it at the time. Um, there's a difference between media and social media.
Yeah.
When you get something on a page in a magazine, right? You understand that as a missive that somebody sent into your life for you to absorb whatever way you're going to absorb it, right? But
Right.
it's over. They made you a package, they made you a little present, and they put a period at the end of it, and then they sent it your way. You can do whatever you want with it. Once you put that thing online, especially on the platforms that we use, but even just on the internet, it literally like almost transforms into social media.
Right.
It's chum. It's just bait.
Yeah.
And so people see it as the prompt for interaction.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It is like it's like a what is it called? Like when it's like an improv prompt.
It's exactly an improv prompt. So
Yeah.
then what's happening is then you put out the prompt and the divorced lady is like, "Okay, uh, I'll respond. You
Yep.
you prompted me, now I'm going back at you," right? At which point you look at her and you're like, "Lady, that wasn't meant as a prompt for you." And you guys are both in a miscommunication, right? Because what you did was you actually made her a present and you sent it to her. It wasn't meant as an interactive experience.
Right. Or it's interesting too because I also didn't have the space to include my story because it's 850 words. It's
Right,
like, lady, I've been divorced. I'm not
Right.
judging anyone for getting divorced. I just like I didn't get to include my first marriage. I didn't have a child with him, so it's different, but I don't judge people for doing whatever they feel. The judgment people felt was not there. That
It's
it's like
emotional.
you're judging yourself. You are putting this judgment. I had to have so many conversations with women in my DMs where I was like, this is your own judgment. I'm not you're putting this on me, but I'm not judging you. I don't care why people I was it's one of those pieces too, and I learned this writing a column. My first writing gig was a column for my small town. And I would write something that I thought was so thoughtful, and it would be about something important, like why the school's education scores were so low. And I'd be like, this is going to be the thing that gets people riled up for the paper. And it would just be crickets. And then I wrote breakfast reviews of all the different breakfast places that were very cheeky and like tongue and it was just kind of fun and light, and I was on deadline, and so I quickly wrote it, and then it was like 3 weeks of letters to the editor, and I learned writing that column, like, it's never the thing you think. That piece, they put it online. I never know when they're gonna put it online, they don't tell me. It had already gone out into the world in the magazine, and it must have been a slow news day. Sometimes they catch and sometimes they don't, and that thing just went bananas for days, and I was like, I wrote this in an hour of, like, white I don't even it was, like, channeled through me. It was something that obviously I always had in me and something I didn't realize until I had my own child and was dealing with all the boomers in my life, and I was on deadline, and it was due in, like, 2 hours. So just pour it out of me, and nobody gets that backstory of, like, I'm not writing this with the intention of it go you never know when something's gonna go viral. You know this. You have no clue what's gonna just catch fire randomly on a Wednesday when you wake up one morning.
Nope. Yeah, and more importantly, who wants to write for virality,
No.
right? It's the like, to me, that is when we talk about, like, things that that have negative effects, as an editor, which, by the way, I am, like, in my soul, I'm an editor, I'm not a writer. I can string together a sentence, and I like writing, but it's really what I really love to do is I love to help other people figure out how to best say what they wanna say.
Mhm.
And for me, as an editor, I look at the need for virality as my enemy. It's like the devil on the writer's shoulder if I'm the angel on the other one. I'm looking at them going, "What is it you actually believe?"
Right.
Like, don't use the metaphor that's the tweet. Use the metaphor that's right. Why are you doing this? Like,
Yeah.
why are you saying this? Why are you talking about this at all? And I mean, it's actually hard because I see the way that virality it's a drug and it's affected the brains of writers and artists and thinkers. And I get it. And I think it has its own competitive advantages. And I'm not saying I want people to not want their ideas or their pieces to win, right? And to reach their readers. But the need for virality makes you write in a kind of drugged out way.
Yeah.
And it's just I don't know. To me, that's a huge challenge of
Doesn't even
the space.
occur to me, but maybe because I've been writing for so long and because we toil away and it's not just doing this podcast, dumpster fire, everything I write. Sometimes things catch fire, sometimes they don't. Things that I wouldn't expect would catch fire do, and things that I would think would be something that people would wanna discuss don't. I just have no way it doesn't even occur to me. The only time it occurs to me now, and I literally hate this process more than anything. I cannot tell you how much I hate it. I cannot wait to be rich enough to pay someone to do it for me, is when we have to title our videos for dumpster fire. It is like Maggie and I are like, this is a fucking nightmare because it's all about like, how do you make and it's 95% of the thing. If you talk to anybody who knows YouTube, they're like 95% is the card and the title of the video. It does not matter what it's about. It's just like, how are you packaging it? None of it matters. All that matters is the card and the title. And it's like, I'm not some wizard or an autist at this stuff, and I'm like, I hate that it's like we talk about it. They're like, you gotta get the facial expressions and the like, you need I'm like, you're manipulating people emotionally though. That's all that is, and I hate it. I don't wanna have to do that. I don't wanna have to make people sad or scared or upset or mad to click on my video.
So, I mean, look, there's if I were to play devil's advocate, I would say, well, you're basically doing a version of what we used to do with magazines. It's cover,
Right.
right? You cover your headlines, your captions, your pull quotes. Those are all meant as enticements,
If it
right?
bleeds, it leads. Yeah.
Correct, right? But on the other hand, there is no escaping the fact that a YouTube title is just much tighter than any real headline cover art. It's much less subtle. And so you're going to get that feeling of that you're being crude and that the person on the other side is engaging with you crudely.
Right. Right. I don't, that yeah, but it's also just like the game you have to
Yeah.
play. I mean, I used to see it too with like the internet headlines. I don't know that I guess you probably have to wrestle with it when you're coming up with headlines for your pieces.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to be so like we really try our best to have the pieces reflect the feel of the piece. It's the headlines to reflect the feel of the piece itself.
Right.
So we really try not to stray too far. So if the piece itself is funny and jaunty and sarcastic, then we give it a sarcastic, funny, grabby headline. If it's not, we kind of try not to. But like, I'll give you an example. We wrote a piece, we had published a piece last week about anti-Semitism in the medical establishment, particularly since October 7th. And one of the editors as we were trying to figure out what to title it, just wrote and said, ask your doctor if jihad is right for you. And there was just no way I wasn't going to use it. It was just too good. And it was actually it was perfect because it was really about the doctors.
Right.
So sometimes you can't, it's things they're too magnetic to resist.
Yeah.
But we do try our best to also be thoughtful and responsible with people's attention.
I know it's just like with dumpster fire we get away with more, but then we realize the internet when we look at like actually the videos that do the best, which I don't normally pay that much attention to, but it's like the very dry headlines. I'm like the internet is not autistic, it's autistic. Like it's very literal. It's not we would always have these like cheeky, punny, kind of funny headlines to try and show you that dumpster fire isn't just like it's not just us being newsy, it's us kind of being satirical and funny about the news, and it just, like, we were being too clever for our own good, too clever for the internet, for sure. It just
Right.
didn't get pushed, they're like, "What is this?" I don't
I
even know.
mean, and
I don't
and
even know
even
what this means.
right, exactly, right? But even worse than that is the feeling, and this has definitely been true for the last 5 years. I don't know whether or not it's changing. I'm trying to figure it out. And I'm actually curious if you feel it is. But there was a feeling that it wasn't just if it from the perspective of the journalist, if it bleeds, it leads. I felt like the readers wanted to black pill. Like
Mm,
they were drawn to the stuff that was like, your life sucks. Here's why.
yeah,
So it felt like they wanted those pieces from us. And there were definitely pieces that we published about things that were really bad and wrong. But then we also had things where it was just like, wait, there's also things we want to write about where things are not so bleak and it is not a dystopian present. And we actually have hope and we are optimistic for certain things about the future and about just being alive. And it felt there was definitely a moment, and I think it still is true, where readers got to a place where they were like, just reflect reality, and the reality to me and the reality that I feel is dark.
Mm.
And I published my most viral piece is a piece called Everything is Broken.
Yeah.
It was, if you read the piece, you see at the end of the piece, I'm actually quite hopeful and I
Mhm.
want to believe in a good future. And all I will say is, I don't think that the optimism and hope in that piece is what made it viral.
Yeah. Well, I think you touched on something that everybody was feeling, and I still feel this way, why I revisit that piece often, and I love the hopeful end of it. But that's like the interesting thing about being in media too is the dynamic, the difference between now that everything is entertainment, it's very messy. It's not like I think from journalists, one of the things that I felt got lost with everybody being ideologue was that reality wasn't being reflected back to me the way that I was perceiving it. I also felt like they completely lost touch with just the average common person's experience, and it was a lot of young people who were it was just weird. The world I was experiencing was not anywhere reflected at all to me by the media that I was consuming, particularly journalism. But then in entertainment, I feel like, Shonda Rhimes has talked about this. You should, and so has Steve Martin, just going kind of in the opposite direction of the culture. And I think even in comedy, you can see this interesting dynamic right now that I'm kind of obsessed with. Nate Bargatze, he's a comedian, sold more tickets than anybody else in all of comedy last year. And he's a clean comedian who doesn't do anything political. And this is what Steve Martin realized. He was like this long-haired hippie, and he talks about how he put on a suit and cut his hair and started going in the opposite direction of the dark Vietnam. Like, we're in the dark culture. And Shonda Rhimes always talks about how um Scandal worked during the Obama years because it was a darker show, but there was a more optimistic feeling. And West Wing worked during the Bush years because it was a more pessimistic feeling, and that was a more optimistic vibe of a show, I guess. She's has this same idea of kind of going in opposite of the culture, because that's, when you're entertaining, that's actually what people are wanting.
It's
Like,
not
I
only
see.
entertainment, it's also, so basically everything moves by dynamics,
Mhm.
right? Dynamics need two opposing forces, right? So that is exactly right. That's partly why the sense that we live in a time of flux, and that flux, it feels dark, is the reason why I'm putting out a magazine that is going to be unchanging and
Yeah.
feel stable, right? And is something you can hold in your hand, and also is meant to be like beautiful and a feast and fun and sexy, because I'm like, live that way. Remember that. That's a huge part of our lives. It's not that there isn't serious stuff in that magazine, there is, but it's all going to come to you beautifully, because exactly that idea of, and I think that's also why people are drawn in this moment, by the way, to voices like yours, because and to voices like Nate's and others, because you're just like, who would be fun to sit with
Yeah.
tonight? Like, who would be fun? I just like, I don't want to think about AI and whether or not the robots are going to take over my life. Like, I just want to actually like have a nice meal with somebody.
Yeah.
And I think we just can't lose sight of how important that is. That's what people want. They want to feel hopeful. They want to feel like there's a reason to be alive, and they want to feel like actually things will get better.
Yeah. I've been listening to Amanda Knox's new book on, which I don't normally do, but I wanted to hear it in her voice. And I love her new book because it really is, like, especially the beginning of it, all about how she kind of survived jail and what she had to go through
Yeah.
psychologically. And then this moment after she got her, sentencing essentially for the 26 years or whatever, and how she had to really accept where she really had to let go of this hope that nightmare was gonna end soon and really accept, like, this is my life right now. And I was thinking about how I feel like so many people I know are in that place. It sounds a lot like recovery too in some ways. When I got sober, like 2 years in, I was like, kind of was going through this whole psychological shift, and then I was like, "Oh, I've just gotta, like, okay, my life is not what I wanted it to be. I've squandered a lot of time. I've fucked up a lot of relationships. I've screwed a lot of things up, but I have to just, this is where I am right now." And it's not losing hope for the future. It's just fully being in the present moment. And this is, I think, I don't know. I feel like when I was listening to her, I'm like, I need this right now. But I feel like we need this message right now because it is easy to get spun out into the dystopian future that is 5 minutes away when you look at the acceleration of robots, AI, all this crazy stuff. Like, I saw a Waymo. I was driving in Austin and I was next to a Waymo and I looked over and it gives me fucking chills down my spine. I know this is not weird for young people, but for me, I was like, that is deeply horrifying to me. And I know I'll get used to it and assimilate, but we're in a we it is a weird moment, and I love that you're putting out a magazine that is just feels magazines were like a whole thing. Like, they all had their own every single one had its own vibe. It was always what I always wanted to I fantasized about starting a magazine, just having, like, okay, what's the theme and
You should
what's
do
the
it.
overall tone? I
You know,
don't have
my
time for that.
my I know that you're a County Highway reader.
Yes.
Uh, and County Highway was started by Walter Kernan, my husband, David Samuels, and that is such a different magazine, for example, than Tablet.
Yeah.
And it is, talk about a distinctive voice and a distinctive identity. And one of the things that I find amazing about County Highway is County Highway, which is basically the premise of it is that if a lot of the thought leader magazines that were once legacy, very prominent legacy voices, they all kind of emerged in a moment in American history when the cities were ascendant and where the assumption was that culture and the arts and our ideas were all going to come from urban spaces. And so they were basically these things that got sent out from cities, and they were inspired by cities and they were inspired by urban life. And David and Walter's contention was really that actually we were in a moment where that was changing,
Mm,
and where inspiration now in America for culture and the arts was going to come from outside the city and from rural areas again. And what I love about it is seeing how rabid their fans are. The readers of County Highway totally get it. And those readers live in cities and suburbs and rural areas. They live all over, but they get particularly David's idea that the country is the inspiration. It's such a weird idea for a magazine.
right.
It's so weird. And it works so well, and
It's so
everybody
good.
gets it. And
Yeah.
like, so to me, that all of which is my long-winded way of saying, if you want to start a magazine, you should do it. Bridget Magazine, let's start it right now. Like, because who knows? All it has to do is be the most Bridget magazine that a Bridget magazine could be, and people will understand it, and it will people will flock to it because it just, I think what we are all looking for right now is stuff that feels both distinctive and real.
Mm. I don't know. I don't think I have time for a magazine right now.
Mm,
I would
on.
write for a magazine, but I don't like I do for Spectator. I love that. And but yeah, I don't think I have time for a magazine at the moment. I'm loving my new show I started though with Two Way, the Real America, and it has a little bit of the like county highway vibe where I'm like I just want to hear from real Americans because I'm again of two minds. Like, I agree that we're not all the media. I think people need to process this stuff. One of the things that I don't like about new media is that there aren't rigorous fact checkers. They don't have the same standards that even these old school I mean, it's tough because they just like drop the ball constantly on all this shit. So
Yeah.
there used to be standards, I guess, at one point, and it's nice to have that, and I don't think individuals or new media has to abide by those rules at all, but and I think people do feel like they are the media. They do everybody is their own little media operation.
Look, I get it. And again, I think that there's a real difference between news gathering um, and what
Processing.
and processing and what's meant to be sort of like thought leader, um, the role of the thought leader in terms of voices or publications, right? So if there is a flood in North Carolina, I really do want to actually see and hear from people in North Carolina.
Right,
I do wanna see it right then from those people, from the people who live on that street.
right,
I trust them the most. Um, I don't necessarily need some reporter from New York to be flown into North Carolina who doesn't know those streets, doesn't know those people. I mean, maybe it's important, and maybe that adds to our understanding just to have fresh eyes from an outsider. But if I had to choose between those 2 people, I know which one I'm drawn to.
right,
And that's okay, right? Then, if I ask though, who do I want to write the big long piece about what is Bill Gates doing in Kenya? I want a reporter who
right,
actually can spend a year on that story, deeply report it, really talk to everyone, think hard about it, and whose job it is to do that. Those 2 things are different. And I think that the idea that we have a media diet that only is one thing is also what's making us dumb, right?
yeah. It's
We need
so
both.
And it's so expensive to do the other one. That's the I mean, some of it is just economics. It's like all
Totally.
and again, the flatness, all of these, local stations being bought up by big stations and
Yep.
people not investing in local news and the death of, the local journalist who and just the kind of the I don't know, I get mad about how these kind of fame whore journalists who have ruined journalism, the way journalists are perceived for so many other journalists who are just truly I think it's a thankless, tireless profession that people pursue for not much money, and it's because they just have a dogged determination to get to the bottom of a story and some kind of truth that they feel is being hid from somebody. But now you have all these celebrity journalists who are more interested in, being famous and going to parties and being on a team than they are actually reporting. And it's kind of now people are like, "Oh, all these journalists, you don't hate them enough." And I get that. I get that when I see a lot of the stuff that comes out of the mainstream media, even like the headlines that are tiptoeing or it's just I see it every day, so I understand it, but it also I don't like that feeling about journalists. They used to provide like a pretty useful function for us. And still do, I think, on a micro level.
Some of them do. That's the
Yeah.
point. The point is like why do we have to have these why do we I mean talk about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? So I was really interested in I've been listening to some of the interviews with Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson around their new book, um, about the cover up of President Biden's decline. And what's super fascinating is that there's an argument that, first of all, I give them both credit because they go on every interview, no matter how combative. They don't shy away from any interview, and they frequently will admit and say, lots of conservative and more right wing outlets got the story right because they were willing to imagine that the story was that he was declined. But when pushed about why they didn't get that story, the argument is, well, reporting is about getting sources to tell you things. And if we couldn't get sources to tell us anything, to tell us that, to talk to us about the decline. So what am I supposed to do? I wish those people would talk to me, but they didn't. And I was like, okay, fine. So 2 years ago, over the summer, Tablet published a very long interview with Obama's biographer, David Garrow. And the point of the interview was essentially to say, who is running this White House? Because it looks like it's not Joe Biden.
Right.
And it was a very long Q&A that in this convoluted way got at Biden's decline. And actually there's whole paragraphs about what was obvious, that Joe Biden was obviously declining. This is in 2023. And at the time, lots of legacy media people actually criticized Tablet for publishing this interview because they were like, this is irresponsible of you. And so it's like, okay, wait, so let me get this right. So you won't say what's in plain sight because you've decided that you define journalism as only when 2 sources or 3 sources from the White House give you confirmation of a thing that you can see with your own eyes.
Right.
Right. And not only that, but you're also going to get mad at a different journalist who does get confirmation,
Right.
who finds a creative way in and says, actually, I will give you confirmation of how we think this White House is being run. And what was amazing about it was it's a total rescinding of their obligation.
Mhm.
The obligation to say what you see with your eyes is the first one. And this idea that journalism is all about access and it's all about who you can get to say what, it's no wonder nobody trusts us. And also, no wonder AI can replace you. If
Right.
like that's the easiest thing in the world to replace. What you can't replace is a person who is committed to going out in the world, seeing what you need to see and what you need to know is real, and coming back and telling you that. And
Mm.
those people, they're still out there and they're still doing their job. And those people are heroes today. They're going to be heroes tomorrow. And you are going to be, as readers and viewers, you are going to be better in your life. Your life is going to be better if you find those people and you figure out how to follow them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. I think podcasting is kind of shred journalism too in so many ways because not, I mean, I say this on a podcast, but there's no fact check. So you can just sit and talk and a lot of it is just it is a lot like journalism and that you just let people talk and people can have their opinions and say what they want to say. And if that's a good thing, I think. And then on the other hand, there's no fact check to it. So you can really like your media diet can determine a lot of what you believe just by the sake of what you're listening to, not to mention that on podcasts during COVID, these people were some of the only people saying things that you were not allowed to say or would get banned for or get slapped with like a warning on YouTube or censored on Twitter or whatever. The podcasters were the only ones who were like, "Hey, why are we shutting down the parks? Like, what is going on here?" But now it's like this idea that because they got this one thing right, they're right about everything, or because you were it's like a crazy fallacy to think that just because you were right about this one thing that or they lied to you about this one thing. Now everything's a lie. I don't really know. What is your feeling about, what's your instinct about kind of where we go from here? I saw
So
this just to give you a good example. I saw this, I saw a comment the other day where it was like, Theo Von and Tim Dillon are the greatest political commentators of our time. And I know both these guys and love them as comedians, but I certainly like wouldn't necessarily trust that they're invested in anything other than their own fame, like comedy and love them, but I certainly wouldn't. It was just it was such a funny thing for somebody who's known as yeah, that's that kind of thing. I'm like, I get it. I completely understand where this person's coming from, but it's also kind of funny to me.
yeah, I mean, look, what I think the there is no going back to the world that we grew up in, and that's a good thing fundamentally. I think, or let's make it a good thing. I think we can make it a good thing. So my feeling about it is I I actually like the idea that Elon put out there, you are the media.
Mhm.
Great, let's make it everyone. And then as the days go on, we're going to realize that now it's not really everyone. Okay, maybe it's only these 1,000 people. Okay, and then as we listen to 1,000 people and we take their advice and we decide to see the world the way that they see it, and those worldviews actually create enormous fuck ups for us. And they don't give us guidance and they don't help us see the world in good ways or in ways that make it better. Um, and you realize that that didn't help you. I think all of a sudden those people are going to fall by the wayside. Here's
Mm.
where I do think that over time we're going to learn who we can trust again. So that's why I think it's really important for the people who would like to be trusted and who believe themselves to, to be worthy of that trust have to stay in the game,
Mm.
because you you have to say, if you believe yourself to have better ideas about foreign policy than Theo Von, which seems like might be possible, you can go out there and have your views and let your views go up against everyone else's and see what happens. That said, from the perspective of somebody who wants, like if I'm talking to a consumer, I would say the consumers think about what you're putting in your brain.
I wouldn't even say my views are better than his. I just know my lane. Like, I just know how to stay, I know that I probably am not the person to be commenting on certain things, just because I know nothing about it, but I guess if, like, you're big enough, why not? These people have Theo was one of the only people talking to normies. He was one of the only people interviewing just, blue collar guys and normal people. And he had people listening to him because it was one of the only places they could go in media that wasn't just a bunch of like people in media talking to each other, and the same out of touch people in New York and DC who kind of all hang out together and know each other, having a similar conversation. So his audience is massive because he was doing something that not a lot of people were doing. But I certainly like, I think he's an amazing podcaster and very good at entertainment, but I like when I hear those things, I'm like, "Political commentator, huh? Okay.
I mean,
Alright."
but I think the other thing is like, you know, um, w- I sort of feel that way about everything now,
Yeah.
right? So where do I go for medical advice? Do, do I automatically believe somebody because they went to med school? Not anymore.
Yeah. I
Like,
mean,
but then it's like, well, okay, so I don't automatically believe those people. Do I believe the homesteading
Maha moms?
lady? I mean, I don't know. If she tells me to take arrowroot or whatever and it works, well, then I'm going to start to trust her. And if she tells me to take violet for my graying hair and it doesn't work, I'm going to not trust her. Right? It's
Mm,
just like at some point, I feel like the flattening of aesthetics is also a flattening of expertise, and it requires us to be better consumers. And
mm,
it's going to require us to find, it's not that we don't need experts, it's just that we have to find the better ones. And that puts a burden on you because the credentialing institutions, which by the way, the credentialing institutions are really what you shouldn't trust anymore
yeah,
and
they're
really
all
what fell
shit
down on the
too.
job.
Yeah.
They that's what you don't believe in,
Yeah.
right? Um I would like, if I had to get my blood drawn, I would like it drawn by somebody who's done it before.
Yeah.
Like just feels like if I'm going to have somebody put a needle in my arm and try to get blood out, it'd be great if they had some skill at it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, do I trust these people just because they have a degree? I don't.
Right.
So it's really we live in this time of disaggregation and of flattening and of real chaos. I think that it just means that the burden is on you
Yeah.
to actually sharpen your own judgment and make a decision. And if you want to get your foreign policy advice from a comedian, then go ahead and do that
Yeah.
and see where it takes you. And if you want to get your medical advice from, a trad wife on Instagram, then go ahead and do that and just see what happens.
Mhm. Yeah. I've been joking on Dumpster Fire that we need to bring infectious diseases back. Like, let's do it, you know? Like, fuck it. All right. You wanna do this? We can it is I keep thinking when as you're talking of this expression that I just repeat ad nauseum around here, which is that reality remains undefeated.
Yep,
In the
that's right.
same way that reality remained undefeated with COVID, in the same way that it's gonna remain undefeated with all this trans stuff that has taken over and seems to be shaking out, you're right, it will also shake out in in all of these other dimensions, and people are gonna have to just reality test their ideas,
Yeah.
and it's gonna be messy,
Yep,
and
that's
there's
right.
gonna be a lot of measles outbreaks.
Yeah, and I feel like that's true. I think we're just going to have to I don't think that believing that we can avoid a kind of messy few decades is smart. I think
Mm,
you want to be vigilant about your life and because I think now really the burden is on you to bring the right ideas into your own brain, your own kids' brains, your own spouse's brains, your house, right? So it's just a matter of, I think we're bringing responsibility and volition back to individuals.
wow. People don't really like to have to do that much of work, Alana.
No, they don't. They don't.
It's not really how Americans like to get their stuff, in case you hadn't noticed.
And
Well, I'm excited for your magazine. Tell me about what's your biggest defective character?
I have a terrible habit of trying to make like one thing do multiple things. Like my husband always jokes that like I want the can opener to also be a pen, and like I try I want this article to do six different things. I want
Mm,
like I need to send an email out and I want to actually ask for six, like I want to actually make things have different functions. The same thing have multiple different functions, and it puts pressure and torque on things and people in my life. And so it's bad. It's a bad characteristic.
And what's your biggest asset?
I'm a really, really, really incredible spotter of talent.
Hmm.
I'm
That's
like,
probably really good as an editor.
it is. But like I can spot talent like in things that are not just my field. Um so I'm just good at spotting talent in other people.
Is the magazine gonna have art and stuff like that too in it?
It's really, really art driven,
Oh, good.
and sort of really highly designed. And you'll see it. You're going to get your copy this week, and it's really meant to be. And just I can tell you that in future issues, there's also going to be perfume ads, like the
Oh,
old, really
yay.
great. So I'm trying to make it be. I'm trying to make the magazine activate as many of your senses as it possibly can.
God, I loved those perfume ads.
Me too.
That is I'm gonna think about that sense of smell thing for a long time.
Yeah.
Where can we find you? Where can we subscribe to Tablet?
Go to tabletmag.com.
Okay. Well, I love you. I love your work. I could talk to you for hours. You're welcome back anytime to talk about anything. I wish I had not like a panel like the group chat, but kind of like the group chat. Like
Yeah. It'd be super fun.
I wish I had like a weekly Maggie's over here cringing and she's like, "No, not another show." Like I wish I had like a weekly show where just every Friday we got together and talked about like whatever was going on in the news and our general vibe. Like a vibe
Well,
check. That's what I want to start. I want to start the vibe check.
if you ever do, I'd love to be part of it.
Okay, you're on the list.
Great. You're
All
great.
right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
This has been Walk-Ins Welcome with Bridget Phetasy. I'm Bridget Phetasy, and you're welcome. It's the dumbest line.